This week on The Handle. Get buzzed on the rise of Amarillo microbreweries. Plus, plug into the past with a walking history book. And head south to see how a small regional town's pumpkins are in demand statewide. All of this right now on Panhandle PBS as we tell the stories of the Texas Panhandle.
My wife, actually, I think she feels guilty about it to this day because it uprooted her entire life and plans. But I think for my 20th or 21st birthday, I can't even remember now, she bought me a book about home brewing. She's like, well, Caleb likes beer and always likes to build stuff. This will be an entertaining book for him. And, you know, that was it. She didn't think it would change the trajectory of our lives, literally. I'm Caleb West. I'm one of the founders and brewers of Panhandle Brewing Co. Partnered with one of my close friends, Trevor Martin. We've known each other for more than a decade and decided to both move back home to open this.
Well, I was in bands, and so that was like my hobby, is kind of playing. Did a little tour with my last band that I was in. And then my family, my wife and I had a new baby, so she was like, I think you should stop touring and doing all that. So I was like, okay, cool, I'm gonna be a family man. But I needed a new hobby, a new outlet. So I started home brewing, and I actually told her that it would be cheaper than me buying beer every weekend, which turns out is absolutely not true, especially today now that we have a brewery.
I loved home brewing. I met with a friend, and we were brewing a lot, and then I was traveling to Dallas for my job about every 6 weeks. I was coming back and forth with that, and that scene was just starting to take off. And come back home, and there was nothing here, so then we brought it back and just decided we're going to start a brewery, and we did. I'm Jared Reed. I'm the co-owner and head brewer of Long Wooden Spoon Brewery, also known as LWS Brewing. We started here, we're actually started our 5th year selling. We've been here 6 years. Amarillo is its own creature. You can't really compare it to like Dallas, Austin, any of those things. Even though we want to, we're not. And it's hard to explain to people until you live here. It's something that the people that live here they set a pretty high bar. I mean, you see it all the time in reviews with places that they set that high bar. And so with beer, people were traveling, they were going to Dallas, Austin, everywhere they went, that was the first thing most of them were looking for, those craft beers. So when we got going, that bar was already set pretty high, and so we have to meet that bar. And sometimes we have to push that bar even higher. And that was the most difficult thing, was making sure that our quality was there and we keep it there.
I mean, when we first started, this kind of thought, and Tallahassee didn't really even have a brewery, but there was a few places where I got to explore like import craft beer, from Germany and England and things like that, and then some places that focused on current American beer at the time. And so it really opened my eyes to a lot of the things that were available to us.
Really, it's the market has just, overall, nationally, it's changed. So as people travel, like I said, that's one of the first things they look for is a craft beer place, even a craft distillery now, even a winery. They're starting to go to those things, and they come back, and because of where we're located in the nation, Amarillo, we're kind of slow to pick those things up. Is what's on the East Coast and West Coast. It used to take 2 years or more before it came here, before it ever caught on. Now, because of the social media and the internet, those things catch on a little quicker because people go and they post online, hey, this is where I'm at, this is what I'm drinking, I really love this. And so those trends change a lot faster now than they used to. So you can't really sit on it, but it's just, plus the manufacturers are starting to bring stuff in a lot better because there's a demand for it. And that has helped. Used to, you'd go to Dallas and you'd get a beer and we couldn't get it here. And now we're able to get those things here. Can't get everything, but it's getting better for Amarillo.
After Tallahassee, we moved to Austin, and immediately we're blown away by the amount of craft beer culture there. Breweries were popping up everywhere and quickly. That's when I reached out to Trevor and was like, okay, we should really do this. We looked at Austin, we considered Lubbock, where Trevor was living. My wife's from Florida, so we actually considered Tampa area very briefly. But around this time was when the Canyon local option election happened and Canyon became wet. Trevor and I both grew up in Canyon, so that was sort of like the initials, like, wow, well, things are changing at home. Like, never dreamed of having a brewery in Canyon or Amarillo, Texas. And our friends opened the Imperial Tap Room. They seem to be having a really good start. And we're looking at places like Crush in downtown Amarillo and Yellow City Street Food, doing this forward-thinking, higher end food, craft culture, beer, like it could work.
Our very first beer we had was our 6th Street Wheat, which is the first beer that we did on the home brewing side over and over and over to make sure we were consistent all the way through. And so we did that over and over. That was our first beer. And then our Texas Woody Twister, which is a Belgian wit, that was our second. And then we had our 501st Dunkelweizen, which was something we did over and over.
What is a wit? I mean, describe it.
A Belgian wit, it's a pretty light beer style. And wit just means white in Belgian. So what it is we take it and we took our 6th Street wheat recipe and then we converted it over to wit, and we added an orange peel to the brew and coriander and orange blossom honey. And so it really brings out that orange. So probably on the market, the big guys, Blue Moon is probably the most popular one. In my opinion, it's a little heavy for a Belgian white, but ours it should be a lighter beer. And that's one of our beers that when we brew it, it moves quick. It doesn't stay on its taps very long. The Dunkelweizen just means a dark wheat beer. And so Dunkel is dark and Weizen is wheat in German. So it's a dark wheat beer. And we developed that one. My best friend's father-in-law was stationed in Germany when he was in the army, and he was talking to us about this Christmas beer that they had. And he wanted us to brew it. And I was like, well, what was it? And he's like, I don't remember. It was just dark and it was Christmas. I'm like, well, that didn't help any. So I did a lot of research, finally found out what I thought it was. We brewed it. He said that was it. And so we brewed it for him, and we named it. It started out naming it after his unit, the 501st. And then it's kind of gradually, because we're such big Star Wars nerds here, it has gradually coalesced with the 501st Legion in Star Wars.
It's awesome to see all the restaurants in town that, have the capability of adding more taps and adding, craft beer. It's really expanding. People are starting to understand what an IPA is, or a sour, or an amber.
There's essentially, 3 primary focal points in a beer, if you will. So there's the hops, there's the malt, and there's the yeast. Obviously there's water included in this process too, but those 3 points can be like the focal point. All of it plays together in a very important way. But the amber ale is our American amber. It actually looks a lot like this. This is our Oktoberfest. It's called Volksbier. But our American amber we keep around year-round. It's actually one of our most popular beers. But it's a malt-influenced beer, or malt-focused beer. And so the emphasis is on these sort of bready, caramely notes. It doesn't finish sweet, but it doesn't finish super bone dry either. Very easy to drink, and it has these sort of rich, kind of complementary notes that go really well with food, especially meat dishes, things like that. Whereas an IPA, it actually stands for India Pale Ale, and there's a whole bunch of history there and a whole bunch of stories that turns out who knows what the actual truth of the scenario is, but originally it started in England, and they were making these fairly hoppy beers, and they have hops have a preservative effect, and so a lot of those beers ended up making it to India. All those things, that doesn't have almost anything to do with what we do now, but it's the kind of the background. And so those beers are emphasizing hop flavors. And so when we say IPA, sometimes it means really bitter. Sometimes it just means really hoppy in flavor. And surprisingly, to a lot of people, that doesn't mean bitter. There is some bitterness to every beer. There's hops in every single beer you drink, sometimes in very small quantities and sometimes in very big quantities. In fact, some of our most popular IPAs have the most hops we've ever put in a beer, and they're not incredibly bitter, but they're incredibly flavorful. And so a lot of American IPA these days is actually more like fruit flavor in a way, although no fruit might be used. It's flavors that come naturally from different hop-like varietals. And so, one of our most popular ones recently was called Pyrite, and it was brewed entirely with Citra hops. We used over 4 pounds per barrel, so the recipe had like 44 pounds of hops in it. And it wasn't bitter hardly at all, but it had this incredible texture and flavor and citrusy and tropical fruit notes. And then the third category for us is a yeast-driven beer. And so Whereas the other two emphasize malt or hops, this emphasizes yeast, and that'd be something more like potentially a wheat beer or a saison, a German Hefeweizen. The hops and the yeast or the hops and the malt are there, but the emphasis becomes flavors that we derive from yeast specifically.
Each tap room is different, so we're different from Pondaseta, we're different from Six Car. So everybody likes that. They go and it's a different atmosphere in each place, so it fits. They'll find their place they like, and some people, they like all of them, so they'll just they go in between. But that atmosphere and the culture is just, the beers are different too. Pondaseta has their styles of beers that they really focus on. Six Car has their styles, and we have our styles.
We got the doors open. That was both the most exciting and most stressful moment of my entire life. We just spent way more money than we ever dreamed we could spend to open a brewery, and then I had to tell people they couldn't have our beer because there was too many people inside. And so that was a crazy experience, but I think it was just a sign of what was to come.
People told us you won't be able to sell IPAs. People only drink, Coors Light or Bud Light or Michelob Ultra here. They don't understand. So we are very nervous, but since the day we've opened, we've had an extremely diverse crowd.
Almost 50% of our customers are travelers. And Amarillo is just in that unique spot on I-40 that they don't always stay here, but it's a nice stopping point. Beer just makes you happy. So it makes you comfortable. It's one of those things that you can actually sit and have a couple and hold a conversation, and it brings people together. I mean, it really is. That's one of my favorite things of this tap room, is watching people. They're sitting at two separate tables, and the next thing you know, chairs are turned and they're actually having a conversation and they're talking, and they'll be here for 2-3 hours talking. Or families will come in and they'll pull out a game and they're playing a board game for 3 hours with their family, and it's a glue. It just brings people together.
Being at a restaurant and seeing somebody who you wouldn't even anticipate being a craft beer consumer being like, oh, you have Pondaseta, I'll take that. Like, almost regardless of what the beer might be, it's a really surreal, sort of exciting thing. Be sitting there drinking a beer and talking to my wife, and then overhear somebody like down the way like order something. I'm like, oh, that's us. It's pretty fun.
Of course, we're 86 years old, and I still work every day, and I'm able to work a few hours every day. I still got hair, and I owe it all to living a good, clean Christian life. And it sure is a lot easier at 86 years old to live a good, clean Christian life.
How did you two meet?
Well,
It's a long story, but my first husband was killed in Vietnam in '67, and I was down at WT going to college, and I'd been a widow for 3 years, and I had a friend that was also a widow, and she told me, she said she had gone to Perryton and she had met, her mother lived there, and she had met this man, and he asked her for a date, but she said she was already involved and she was having some students.
She called me immediately.
Anyway, she said she didn't want to get involved with a farmer, and asked if I would like to go with him or meet him, and I said yeah. So we met at her house and hit it right off. He told everybody he fell in love with the first meal he ate at my house.
Oh, she's the best cook there ever was. Pardon. I hope I said it.
That will be edited.
No, that's staying in.
My father was very, very religious, so I was raised very, in fact, I never did dance until I met him.
The first place I took her to after we were still going together.
Yeah, our first date.
Our first date, I took her to the Miami cow calling back when they stomped the floor pretty loud. And I think I traumatized her at that time. So we corrupted her good right there.
He tells everybody I was sure easy to corrupt.
We are located here at this filming in Bull Canyon, which is a large canyon on the ranch that we've improved to use for family reunions and of course for family get-togethers. That's the one thing that we do that I have no doubt that it is worth the effort.
They're my great nephews now. Come from New York City or from California and all live in the city. And they come down here and just turn them loose, and there's not a square inch of this place that they don't cover.
Very little of the button business goes on at our family reunion. When we started building, we had lots of help. We had 4 sons, 2 nephews, and then we had 2 boys that might as well be our sons that were in my band that I had at that time. So you take 8 young people, sometimes with a little beer involved, and you come up with some strange ideas. So we started with the cabin, and then we added shades to cook under and serve food under. And then we added the blacksmith shop, and of course trampolines for the kids come in, and it just slowly grew, and we had more fun building the Red Dog Saloon than anything. If you look at the face of the saloon, you notice it's built out of an old cypress overhead water tank that was on a ranch at Goodnight, Texas, just north of where the Charles Goodnight Museum and all is. And there was just enough of it to build a front on the Red Dog Saloon. So it goes back probably to 1915 or 16, somewhere like that.
But your mother was the first one that fell out of it.
Yeah, my mother was the first one that fell out of the Red Dog Saloon. And she was about how old? 75?
Yeah, 70 or
She
70.
was probably 75 years old. And so we drove stakes. We actually were coordinated enough that we actually measured and drove stakes and put lines to build on. And she was in there looking around, said, it's not going to be very big. And when she turned and walked out, she stubbed her toe on her line and fell out of the Red Dog Saloon.
Before it was here.
And the amazing thing was, when we drove the stake back, we didn't hit the right hole. And the south end of the saloon took 2 hours to frame it in because it's 2 foot out of line, out of square. But a saloon doesn't make any difference. This area goes back to Lewis Carhart, the minister that established Clarendon, and he sold the land to a group of investors from England called the Swan Cattle Company. They operated for about 6 years and then went broke. And their land, it was called, they branded the Broken Heart brand, and they raised horses and mules and some cattle. But they went broke, and the parcel of land was sold on the courthouse steps of today's Donnelly County. The courthouse is still there, and it was a sheriff's sale, and Alfred Rowe, who was also from England and had large land holdings there, he bought the entire block. It was approximately 61,500 acres, about 96 sections of land. And he added that to his already existing row ranch. And at that time, he ran from Highway 70 to the Wheeler County line and from McClellan Creek on the north side of I-40 down to about Headley. So it was a huge ranch, and our ranch was just one of the places inside that. Then Alfred Rowe became Body 109 on the Titanic when it sank. And they couldn't settle the estate because World War I was in the process, and when the war was over, then his estate was settled. And Billy Lewis bought the land at that time, and he also owned other big ranches. In fact, he was considered the largest Texas landowner for a period of time before he died. Then after that, the land was divided up and sold to several different places. There were a few row heirs still left, and they took parts of it. And our part of it here was bought by Mr. McMurtry, Charlie McMurtry. And his family all is famous from the Abilene, Archer City area. I think I'm correct in saying he was a great uncle to Larry McMurtry, who of course wrote Lonesome Dove. But Mr. McMurtry ran the land several years, and then he finally sold the North Camp, Red Camp they called it, to my father in 1949. In about 1990, we became involved with the Barbar Collectors of America, and I was a tool collector at that time and started collecting just hand tools of all types. I've given the really good ones, the keeper museum quality tools, given them to Clarendon and Square House, and a big collection went to Elk City, Oklahoma in their farm museum there. And I put a set of barbed wire collecting tools in the museum at Perryton. And of course, our museum that we established in McLean put all of the barbed wire tools nearly into there. The barbed wire collectors only had one museum in 1990, and that was at La Crosse, Kansas, and it was a very small museum. They wanted to establish a larger museum on a more well-traveled road. Well, McLean is I-40 and old Route 66. So we had an empty building there that was once a brassiere factory for Sears. And it operated for 20 years and worked 100 women during that time. And they closed the factory down and moved it to Pampa, and then I think it went to Mexico. So the building was empty. So we worked a deal with the McLean City, and we leased the building, and we started putting in Route 66 stuff and barbed wire stuff.
We have lots of people will come in and they say, why would anyone want a barbed wire museum? You know, and I say, well, go through it and then you tell me. When they come out, they're just flabbergasted. They said, we just didn't realize the history of it, how the West was settled because of it, and that there was that much different kinds that's collectible.
We had one of our collectors down south rolled up the two huge balls of barbed wire that out in front of the museum that we set up on pedestals. So he had it as a yard ornament, so we brought it up and set it up there. One of the most interesting incidents we had a letter from an art group in Florida, and they wanted to know if we'd be interested in them as one of their projects, making a barbed wire museum to fit over these two barbed wire balls.
Barbed wire brassiere.
Brassiere.
Yeah, barbed wire brassiere.
Brassiere that'll fit over the two balls out in front. We turned that down. We didn't think that was...
Well, he said he didn't know how he was going to haul it up here.
Yeah, we'd have to go down and get it. You just don't go haul a 12-foot brassiere, you know. I'm sure the editing will come in handy there. It's hard to hold a straight face in Bull Canyon. Of course, I am a farm auction addict, and I bought a few things off and on there. And I'm also a plastic 5-gallon bucket addict. And if there's something in that 5-gallon bucket, the bucket's free. I just buy the whole bucket and bring it home and hang it up. But I'm kind of kicking that habit now. I don't stop anymore and pick up buckets.
Buckets.
That is flabbergasted, aren't you?
When you're writing that column, he used to write a column for the Amarillo paper, and he said, anyone that tells me the most uses for a 5-gallon bucket will get a free subscription to the paper. And you would be surprised at all the answers we got. It was hilarious.
278 uses for plastic buckets.
What was the craziest one?
Well, the guy said that he had 4 brothers, and they lived upstairs and slept in a bedroom there. And he said their tennis shoes smelled so bad they put them in a 5-gallon bucket and hung it out the window so that they could sleep at night. I think that was My neighbor said that she soaked her feet in it, but her feet got so big she couldn't put them in the 5-gallon bucket, so she had to quit that.
And one bachelor said that he stacked his up, sideways, and that's what he put his underwear and his socks and all his laundry in. He didn't have a dresser or chest of drawers or anything. That's what he put.
The man at Canadian teaches cow dogs, and he has a pen and he lays a 5-gallon bucket down on its side in that pen and teaches cow dog pups to pen ducks into the 5-gallon bucket. That's how he teaches his dog.
What's the most trouble he's ever been in with you?
Most trouble.
How long is this program? The secret of our marriage is when we married, we decided that she would make all of the little decisions and I would make all the big decisions. And we've been married 49 years now. So far, big decisions never come up.
We've been doing a pumpkin display for about 15 years and really went big about 12 years ago when we created the village and started building houses out of pumpkins. Dave Forehand, and I'm Vice President of Gardens at the Dallas Arboretum. And we are here at the pumpkin pile factory, if you will. This is where all the pumpkins that this particular farm harvests come to be processed. Of course, we're from the Dallas Arboretum. We're here just to check up on the harvest and see what's going on because we're excited about getting our pumpkins. We're going to have over 90,000 pumpkin squash and gourds that are delivered to us so we can build our world-famous pumpkin village as part of our Autumn at the Arboretum display through Thanksgiving in November.
So we grow about 65 different varieties of pumpkins, squash, gourds, corn, just about anything that you could think of that's fall merchandise. I am Lindsay Pyle, and we are standing in the middle of one of Pumpkin Pyle's barns that we ship pumpkins from here in Floydada, Texas. We have a Cinderella, Fairy Tale, Crystal Star. The black one is called Yokohama. We have big jacks, small jacks. We have little bitty miniature size. We grow cheddar pumpkins, which are what is used for canning purposes. We have Knucklehead, we've got Warties, we have one called Porcelain Doll, and it was bred specifically for breast cancer awareness, and so a portion of our sales we send back to the research facility. So we have every shape, color, size you can pretty much imagine.
We always theme the village kind of to have something there. It's Adventures in Neverland. So it's Peter, Wendy, Tinkerbell, Captain Hook. We're going to have a little pirate ship built out of the pumpkin. Right at this moment, we're planting 40,000 marigolds in the beds to get our orange and yellow colors for fall, along with mums and many other things. So it's quite a display. So when you add the pumpkins with the flowers, it's kind of a color explosion.